What if I told you that ancient Egypt wasn't the greatest empire in Africa, and that the true African power was deliberately erased from history? Perhaps everything you learned in school, in books, in documentaries about ancient Egypt is only part of the truth. Behind the imposing pyramids, the glorified pharaohs, and the sphinxes that enchant the world, lies an even more powerful, deeper, darker history, one that has been buried for centuries. An empire that rivaled Egypt, conquered it, ruled it, but that almost no one knows about today. An African empire that official history itself tried to silence. A name that was deliberately erased from the records, rewritten, distorted, censored, hidden with such zeal that few people know of its existence, even though it is one of the greatest symbols of African royalty ever seen on this planet. In this video, you will discover the hidden truth about the Kushite Empire, also called the Nubian Empire, and understand why Egypt and the West worked so hard to erase this name from humanity's collective memory. We will expose ignored facts, historical and biblical evidence, documents, inscriptions, real images, and artifacts that have turned their backs on the spotlight of history, but are now resurfacing to change how you see the entire timeline of Africa and the world. If you think you know who the real pharaohs were, prepare for a mind-blowing revelation. If you believe that Egypt has always been the center of African power, culture, science, and spirituality, this video will prove you wrong, clearly, deeply, and powerfully. You will realize that this truth was intentionally hidden, not by chance. You will discover who profited from this silence, who had an interest in concealing this African power, and how much this still impacts us today. Our culture, our faith, the way Black people are portrayed, respected, or subjugated in the modern world. And no, this is not just ancient history. The erasure of Kush still echoes today. It resonates in classrooms, churches, the media, and everyday conversations. It shapes identities. It erases roots. It weakens the self-esteem of millions of Black people who grew up believing that their history began in slavery, when in fact it began on thrones. If you're seeking a deeper, truer, and completely liberating understanding of the origins of African peoples and the real history of the most spiritual and ancestral continent on Earth, then watch this video until the end, because there's no romanticization here. There's truth, there's power, there's awareness, and there's the chance for you to reconnect with something you may not even have known was waiting for you all this time. In this video, you'll see why textbooks ignore the great Black empires of Africa and how official history has silenced the grandeur of Kush. You'll understand what this ancient kingdom was, flourishing before, during, and after the height of Egypt, and how it expanded its spiritual, military, and political influence throughout the African continent and beyond. You'll discover who the Black pharaohs who reigned over Egypt were, figures like Paye, Taharka, and Shabaka, and why their names were erased from historical records. You'll understand how Western Egyptology was used as a tool to whitewash Egypt and erase Kush, distorting not only the skin color of the pharaohs, but the entire legacy of Africa as the cradle of civilization. You will also see archaeological evidence that no one has shown you. Murals, pyramids, sculptures, and artifacts with clearly African features, which are still hidden in museums around the world. You will delve into the connections with the Bible in verses that mention Kush and his hidden prophecies, passages that have been read for centuries but never understood for their true meaning. You will reflect on the devastating impact of this erasure on the identity and self-esteem of Black people, and why it is so urgent to reclaim this memory now. We will also talk about resistance, how African and Afro-descendant peoples, even in the face of so much silencing, are rediscovering their roots and reconnecting with their spiritual heritage. We will understand why this truth is so frightening, why the system fears Black empowerment, and how academic, political, and religious censorship works to keep this history hidden. And finally, we will show that the Kushite Empire is not dead. It lives, it breathes, it pulsates in the blood, culture, faith, and strength of every Black person who dares to remember who they are. This video isn't just about history. It's about identity. It's about truth. It's about the power that was stolen from us, and that now needs to be reclaimed. And if you feel something igniting inside you as you listen to this, don't leave now, because what you're about to discover in the next scenes could completely change how you see the past, the present, and especially your own future, because it all begins with a deafening silence, the silence of official history. By the way, before we embark on this powerful journey of revelation, Tell me in the comments, had you ever heard of the Kingdom of Kush? Did you learn about it in school? Or is this the first time you're encountering this forgotten part of African history? Your opinion is very important. When you comment, you not only strengthen this content in the eyes of the algorithm, but you also actively participate in the reconstruction of a memory that has been erased for centuries. Here, every comment is a cry against historical erasure. And if this beginning has already moved you, leave a like right now. Not because it's just another video, but because this truth needs to reach more people. The more likes, the more YouTube delivers this content to those who also need to break free from the lie. And of course, subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell, because here we will continue to unearth the mysteries, the hidden truths, and the stories that the system tried to silence. This is just the first layer. What comes next is even more revealing. The silence of official history is not just a flaw, it is a project conceived, articulated, and maintained with a single objective: to erase the memory of entire peoples. When we talk about Africa, what comes to most people's minds is pain, slavery, misery, exploitation. Few think of glory, royalty, technology, ancestral knowledge. And this, unfortunately, is not by chance. From a very young age, we are taught to see the African continent as a secondary, peripheral territory, almost as a backdrop in the history of humanity. But the truth is exactly the opposite. Africa is the cradle of humanity, yes, but it is also the cradle of empires, gigantic empires, rich, sophisticated, with armies, writing systems, complex administrative structures, and profound spirituality. But all of this has been carefully removed from books, classrooms, and school curricula. What remains are shadows, decontextualized fragments of grand cultures, always treated as exceptions and never as the rule. Have you ever noticed how old maps depicted Africa? Enormous blank spaces, terra incognita, unknown. Not because they truly didn't know what was there, but because there was a choice, not to record it, not to value it, not to name it, a strategic silence. While European empires were mapped down to the most irrelevant details, the interior of Africa was represented as an empty land, when, in fact, civilizations were thriving there, exchanging, building, warring, winning. The Kingdom of Kush, for example, was there all along. But did you see that name in your school books or in popular history documentaries? Probably not. And even when it is mentioned, it appears as an appendix to Egypt, as if its only importance were having been conquered or influenced by the Egyptians. What they didn't tell you is that it was Kush who dominated Egypt at a certain period. It was Kush who imposed its kings on the land of the pharaohs. It was Kush who marched with its army north and established an entire dynasty on the Egyptian throne, and all of that was deliberately erased. For centuries, the academic elite reinforced the idea that ancient Egypt was an isolated miracle of the Middle East, avoiding as much as possible associating it with sub-Saharan Africa. A kind of imaginary border was created, where Egypt was part of the Mediterranean and civilized world, while the rest of Africa was treated as barbaric, primitive, and without history. This separation is not only artificial, but also profoundly racist. And it continues to be present today in textbooks, museums, and TV series. Now, let's reflect together. Why was the erasure of Kush, and of so many other African empires like Mali, Ghana, Songhai, and Aksum, so necessary for the Western world? Would recognizing the existence of great black civilizations threaten the Eurocentric narrative that sustains the system to this day? Would admitting that African peoples not only resisted but led great nations change how black people see themselves and are seen? It's important to understand that the problem isn't just what was said, but mainly what was omitted. When you don't present alternatives, when you purposefully silence certain names, cultures, and achievements, you control how future generations will perceive the world. That's why many people grow up believing that Africa is synonymous with scarcity, because the other side was never presented. The side of abundance, the side of leadership, the real side. And when we finally begin to explore this side of the story, we encounter obstacles. There's a lack of material, a lack of reliable sources, a lack of incentive, because this silence echoes to this day in institutions, in universities, in libraries, in the educational system as a whole. This silence is not merely the absence of a voice. It's the presence of a filter, a carefully constructed barrier to keep knowledge locked away, distant, inaccessible. But what happens when that silence is broken? When we begin to look at old maps with different eyes, to excavate the details, to research forgotten names, erased kings, ignored monuments, history begins to change. The truth begins to emerge, and the system's fear of this change becomes evident. Because those who know their history rise up, those who recognize their roots are strengthened. Those who understand where they came from no longer accept any narrative forced down their throats. And that is exactly what we are doing here, breaking this silence, bringing to light the hidden truths, the erased names, the deeds that should never have been forgotten. We are reclaiming what rightfully belongs to African memory and the collective consciousness of Black people, and which, until today, has been denied. So, if you've made it this far, tell me, why do you think school never told you about Kuxi? Do you think the erasure of this story was accidental or intentional? Write in the comments. I choose to break the silence of history if you are with me on this mission, or simply, I want to know more about Kush. So I understand that this topic needs to remain alive here on the channel. And of course, if you feel that this content is stirring something within you, share it with someone. Because awakening alone is powerful, but awakening in a group is transformative. Hold on tight, because what comes next will shake up everything you thought you knew even more. Let's continue, because the next point will reveal who Kush really was and why this name is so important, not only to Africa, but to all of humanity. But who, after all, were these people who so disturbed the dominant narrative? Who were these kings who defied time, the desert, empires, and oblivion? We will now talk about the Kingdom of Kush, the true Black glory of antiquity, an African power that flourished long before the books told you, that built, warred, expanded, and dominated territories that, even today, remain shrouded in mystery. Kush was no ordinary village, nor a small kingdom lost among mountains and valleys. Kush was a sovereign, structured, influential African empire with economic, political, and spiritual power. Its kings were not merely tribal chiefs. They were sovereigns worthy of being called pharaohs. Its origins date back to the banks of the Nile River, south of what we now call Egypt, in a region that many historians are quick to call simply Nubia, rather than admit its true name, Kush. This territory was fertile, strategic, and full of natural resources such as gold, ivory, incense, copper, and precious stones. It was a crucial trade route, a transit point for caravans connecting Central Africa to the Mediterranean. It was no wonder that Egypt always looked south with a mixture of desire and fear. Kush represented a force that could not be ignored. But we are not talking about a people who merely resisted Egypt. We are talking about a people who conquered Egypt, who crossed the desert frontier and reached the northern banks of the Nile with the strength of their culture, their armies, and their spirituality. It was the Kushite people who founded the so-called 25th Egyptian dynasty, also known as the dynasty of the Black Pharaohs, a period in which Egypt was unified from north to south, under the command of kings who came from Kush, kings who were Black, African, and fully aware of the spiritual and cultural power they carried. Pa, the first pharaoh of this dynasty, not only conquered Egypt but also left a clear message. He did not come merely to rule. He came to restore order, to bring back the spiritual values that the Egyptians had lost. His successor, Shabaka, went further. He strengthened the worship of traditional gods, rebuilt temples, and attempted to restore a morality that was already eroding within the Egyptian elite. These men were not usurpers, as many try to portray them. They were reformers. They came to restore the essence to an empire that had lost itself in its own arrogance. And you know what's most impressive? Even with all this impact, with this striking presence in archaeological records, in stone inscriptions, in temples and pyramids that still resist the passage of time, the name of Kush hardly appears in modern history books. When it does appear, it's timidly, almost like a footnote. And this isn't for lack of evidence, it's for excessive fear. Fear of admitting that Black Africa was more than a victim. It was a protagonist. It was an empire. It was a point of reference. And don't think that Kush was an extension of Egypt. On the contrary, although the two empires exchanged influences, languages, and religious rituals, Kush had its own identity. Its gods, though similar in name, had different functions. Its funerary rites followed a unique symbolism. Its pyramids, smaller and more inclined, point to a deeper spiritual understanding. Its calendar, its military system, its clothing, everything pointed to an autonomous, complex civilization proud of its ancestry. The Kushite people were not merely seeking political power. They viewed kingship as a spiritual mission. The king was seen as the link between the visible and invisible worlds, between the living and the ancestors. And this, in itself, shows how much this civilization understood about spirituality, purpose, and transcendence. It wasn't just about conquering lands. It was about restoring the balance between heaven and earth. And the most ironic or painful thing is that all of this has been erased, distorted, and ridiculed over the centuries. The image of the Black Pharaoh has been replaced by Eurocentric representations. Kush's glory has been reduced to brief mentions. His achievements have been ignored. His contribution has been minimized. And all this to maintain the narrative that civilization and blackness are opposites, when in fact, they were synonymous for centuries. And here's an important reflection. Why is it so difficult, even today, to see film productions, series, or even documentaries showing the Kushite Empire with the grandeur it deserves? Why does Hollywood insist on showing Egypt with white actors, but never portrays the era of the Black Pharaohs with the respect it deserves? Why do so many prefer to believe that Africa had no history before slavery, even when the temples, thrones, and ruins are there, screaming for attention? The answer lies in consciousness, because whoever controls the narrative controls the collective consciousness. And if Black people know where they came from, if they know that their ancestors built empires, ruled lands, were kings, priests, and warriors, then it will be much harder to keep them submissive, alienated, and disconnected from their essence. And that's why you need to keep watching this video. Because every second from now on will deconstruct layers of lies and bring you even closer to your true identity. If this content is making you see history in a way you've never seen it before, tell me in the comments. I recognize the glory of Kush. Write that for me. It's not just a phrase, it's an act of resistance. Or if you prefer, comment, I want to know more about the Black Pharaohs, so I know you're with me on this mission to rescue a memory that should never have been lost. And if you're already feeling the weight of this truth pulsing within you, hold on tight, because in the next section we're going to delve into who these Black Pharaohs were, names, faces, deeds, and what the world tried to hide about them. Because Egypt tried to erase Kush, but Kush lives on. And now, it's time to bring to light who was really on the throne. Kush lives on, not just as a distant echo of history, but as flowing blood, as pulsating memory, as a flame that insists on burning even after centuries of attempts at erasure. And if what you've seen so far has impressed you, what comes next will make even more sense. Because the time has come to speak openly about those who occupied the throne of Egypt not as invaders, but as legitimate rulers, the Black Pharaohs. Men who not only reigned but profoundly marked Egyptian history, even though they were systematically removed from it. Let's begin with a powerful name, Piye. Also known as Pianki, he was the founder of the famous 25th Egyptian dynasty, the so-called Kushite dynasty. Piye was more than a warrior king. He was a strategist, a devotee of the gods, and a visionary. When he marched north from Kush, he did not do so with the brutality of an ordinary conqueror. He saw himself as a restorer, someone fulfilling a spiritual mission. Egypt, fragmented, decadent, mired in internal disputes and political corruption, needed direction, and Piye believed that this calling was his. His first act upon entering Egyptian soil was not to raise a sword, it was to raise an altar. He reconnected the throne with the temple, restored the monarchy to its divine character, and reminded the Egyptians of the power of ancestral spirituality. He believed that the pharaoh was not merely a ruler, but a living bridge between the gods and the people. His decrees were imbued with reverence, his diplomacy precise, and his victory inevitable. When he conquered Lower Egypt, he did not humiliate the defeated, he purified them, demanding that they wash themselves, consecrate themselves, and acknowledge his authority as divine will. After Piye came his brother and successor, Shabaka, a name that carries weight. Shabaka not only consolidated the empire, but also strengthened what Piye had begun. He brought even more emphasis to spirituality, rebuilding temples, restoring sacred texts, and ensuring that the voice of the gods was once again heard throughout Egypt. One of his most significant actions was preserving ancient teachings in stone, literally. He carved documents that would otherwise have been lost forever. And in doing so, Shabaka was not just ruling, he was perpetuating a spiritual heritage. It was more than politics. It was sacred. And so, among the great names of this glorious dynasty, emerges Taharqa, perhaps the most cited, although almost always in a distorted way. Taharqa was young when he ascended the throne, but his leadership was marked by strength and wisdom. He expanded the empire to the borders of Palestine, confronted foreign empires, strengthened alliances, and raised Kush to its zenith. He ruled with a firm hand and a high spirit. In his time, Kush and Egypt were not two separate kingdoms. They were one nation, united under the reign of a black pharaoh. And this, of course, was unbearable for those who could not accept that blackness could also mean sovereignty, organization, and greatness. But then comes the painful part, and the part that needs to be said clearly. These names were deliberately erased. Erased from school curricula, erased from history books, erased from visual representations, erased from the great Western narratives. How many times have you seen films about ancient Egypt portraying Pa, Shabaka, or Taharqa as legitimate kings? How many times has official history shown that Egypt was ruled by an African black lineage from the south? The attempt to erase these names was not an innocent mistake. It was an intentional act, driven by a deep desire to sever the connection between Black Africa and civilization. Because recognizing that black pharaohs ruled Egypt is to recognize that the pinnacle of Egyptian culture, so admired by the world, was, in part, the work of Africans. This would dismantle centuries of Eurocentric construction, institutionalized racism, and systematic manipulation of collective memory. But the truth endures. The statues are still there. Some mutilated, others hidden in museum storage, far from the public. The inscriptions on the stones tell the story that books try to silence. The temples still echo the names of Pa, Shabaka, Taharqa. They lived, they reigned, they marked an era. And today, despite all attempts at erasure, they are resurfacing as symbols of strength, ancestry, and reconnection. Do you understand the importance of this? Do you understand the impact of looking back and seeing men who looked like you on the throne of the world's most admired empire? Do you understand how much this changes the narrative? How much this redefines not only history, but your perception of yourself? It's not just an academic question. It's a question of identity, of justice, of reclaiming the truth. And now that you know these names, you carry a responsibility. The responsibility of not letting them be forgotten again, of repeating them, of sharing them, of teaching them, of looking in the mirror and seeing beyond the reflection, seeing a legacy, seeing Pa in his leadership, seeing Shabaka in his wisdom, seeing Taharqa in his courage. And if you've made it this far, write in the comments one of the phrases that can change everything. I recognize the black pharaohs. Or if you prefer something more direct, Pa, Shabaka, Taharqa, you will live forever. These words are more than just letters. They are seeds. And when you plant these seeds, you help rebuild an empire, not of stone, but of consciousness. And get ready, because the truth is only beginning to emerge. What follows will show you how all of this was manipulated, distorted, whitewashed, and why. Because now, it's time to expose the game behind Egyptology. Now that the names of Pa, Shabaka, and Taharqa are alive in your memory, we need to look clearly at the strategy that tried to do the exact opposite. Bury them. Not under sand, but under layers and layers of distortion, silence, and manipulation. Because if there is a weapon more powerful than war, it is the control of the narrative. And it is precisely at this point that we enter one of the most painful and revolting aspects of this whole story, the racial and ideological manipulation of Western Egyptology. When Europeans began to explore Egypt more intensely between the 18th and 19th centuries, driven by archaeological, commercial, and political interests, they encountered something that contradicted everything they believed about civilization, racial superiority, and cultural heritage. Monumental ruins, mathematically perfect pyramids, tombs filled with astronomical wisdom and ancient spirituality, all built by an African people. But this detail, the most important of all, became the most unsettling. Because recognizing that the greatest empire of antiquity had been born in the heart of Africa and ruled by black people directly challenged the colonial mentality of the time. It was unacceptable, incompatible with the logic of white superiority that justified slavery, racism, and domination over peoples considered inferior. The response to this identity crisis was simple, but profoundly dishonest. Rewrite history, alter visual representations, distort translations, omit data, and above all, whitewash the image of ancient Egypt. This is how Egyptology as we know it today was born, not as a neutral and objective science, but as an ideological tool used to save Egypt from its African origins. Instead of delving into the obvious connections between Egypt and the rest of Africa, European scholars rushed to create forced links with Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, the Middle East, anywhere but the continent to which Egypt geographically belongs. They began to say, for example, that the pharaohs had Mediterranean, Semitic, and European features. Statues that clearly showed wide noses, thick lips, and Afro-descendant features began to be described euphemistically as exotic, undefined, or even idealized. Worse, many of these sculptures were deliberately mutilated. Broken noses, lips torn off, faces destroyed. Coincidence? No. It was a symbolic way of erasing what bothered them, the unquestionable evidence of Egypt's blackness. Several scholars of the time, respected men in their universities and scientific academies, published works that today, to our eyes, sound absurd, but which influenced generations. They claimed that even though Egypt was on African soil, it was an exception, a miracle of civilization amidst the barbarity of the continent. They created a fantasy called White Egypt, and it was sold to the world with such zeal that, even today, it survives in schools, encyclopedias, and film productions. How many times have you seen a black pharaoh portrayed as the protagonist in a Hollywood film? How many times have you seen Cleopatra or Ramses played by African actors? The answer is clear, and it hurts. This process of erasure was not merely visual, it was also linguistic and academic. Western translators often altered or interpreted hieroglyphs in a convenient way. Ancient descriptions that spoke of the dark skin of Egyptian kings were softened or ignored. Texts that mentioned the Egyptians' relationship with the Kushites, their relatives from the south, were treated as unreliable or spiritual metaphors, all to protect the constructed narrative that civilization could not, in any way, have arisen from black bodies. And here, we need to be direct. This is not a historical detail. This is a political construct. It is a pillar of the structural racism that shaped the modern world. Because if you remove the connection between black people and civilization, if you erase the image of black people as kings, as architects, as astronomers, as priests, what remains is a stereotype of servitude, of marginality, of inferiority. And this stereotype is precisely what fuels the prejudice, the violence, the inequality that we experience to this day. The whiteness of Egypt was, and still is, an act of war. A war against memory, a war against ancestral pride, a war against truth. And like all wars, it has victims. Entire generations of young black people who grew up without knowing that their ancestors were not just enslaved, they were kings, who grew up believing that Africa was always a colony, always silence, always pain. But now, here, in this video, we are breaking that cycle. And perhaps you're wondering, why does this still continue? Why, even with all the archaeological, visual, textual, and spiritual evidence, is there still so much resistance to admitting that Egypt was African and that much of its glory came from black people? The answer is simple, because truth sets you free, and free people no longer accept chains, neither physical, nor mental, nor historical. That's why this conversation needs to happen. That's why this video exists. Because the more we talk, the more silence loses its power. The more we reclaim the past, the more historical manipulation weakens. The more we look at the facts with clear eyes, the more the lies crumble. And I want to invite you now to be part of this reconnection movement. If what you are hearing here today is opening your eyes to a new way of seeing your history, your ancestry, your spiritual origin, then write in the comments, "The truth sets me free." Or if you want to go further, write, "Egypt is African, and Africa is my root." These phrases are not just for engagement, They are declarations of resistance, of identity, of healing. Hold on tight, because in the next section, we're going to delve into the evidence, the objects, the records, the evidence that archaeology couldn't hide. What was forgotten will now be remembered, and you'll see it with your own eyes. What was forgotten will now be remembered, and perhaps you still have doubts. Perhaps even after everything we've discussed, that voice conditioned by traditional education still whispers in your ear. Were the pharaohs really black? Was Kush really that important? Isn't that an exaggeration? Well, now comes the most concrete part of this journey. Now we're going to the physical facts. We're going to the material evidence. We're going to the archaeology. Because it's no longer just about accounts or hypotheses. We're talking about real, visible, tangible archaeological evidence, which, despite all attempts at erasure, remains there, standing firm, bearing witness to a truth that many have tried to hide but haven't been able to completely erase. And perhaps the most symbolic example of this is where it's least expected, in the pyramids themselves. While the entire world obsessively focuses on the pyramids of Giza in Egypt, they forget, or simply don't mention, that there are more pyramids in Sudan than in all of Egypt. Yes, that's right. The Meroe region, which was one of the great capitals of the Kushite Empire, is home to more than 200 pyramids, many of them older, steeper, and equally impressive in their engineering. These pyramids were not built by Egyptians, but by Kushite kings, by African dynasties that had their own funerary rites, their own sacred architecture, their own symbolic language. And why does nobody talk about this? Because accepting that Black Africa developed pyramids, advanced spirituality, political complexity, and territorial dominance contradicts the entire discourse that attempts to associate blackness solely with marginality or servitude. These pyramids, silent, majestic, forgotten by the major tourist circuits, are physical proof of the Kushite legacy. Each stone stacked there is a protest against erasure. If the pyramids speak loudly, the sculptures shout. Several statues found in the regions of Upper Egypt and Nubia depict royal figures with unmistakably African features: wide noses, thick lips, high cheekbones, curly hair, large eyes, broad necks, and regal posture. These statues were not sculpted to please tourists. They were faithful representations of the kings, priests, and nobles who led their nations. They did not hide their appearance. On the contrary, they celebrated their aesthetics, their ethnicity, their origin. Many of these sculptures, when found by European archaeologists, were mutilated, deliberately damaged, especially the face. The reason? Because while the body structure could still be interpreted neutrally, the face revealed the truth, the color, the features, the ancestry. And to prevent this truth from reaching the Western public, the most effective solution was to destroy, to tear off noses, break jaws, disfigure eyes, a true attempt at archaeological murder. But even mutilated, these sculptures continue to say what they need to say. The pharaohs were black. The Kushites were kings. Africa was the center, not the periphery. And then there are the mural paintings found in tombs, temples, and ceremonial walls. In many of these murals, especially the oldest and least altered, we find figures painted in dark tones, usually intense browns, almost black. These paintings show leaders in ceremonial robes, crowns, scepters, surrounded by soldiers, priests, and sacred symbols. It is impossible to deny the African presence there, not only because of the skin color, but also because of the social contexts depicted. Those figures were not servants. They were leaders, kings, spiritual authorities. Do you see how it all fits together? How each recovered fragment builds an image that contradicts everything they've tried to teach us? And it doesn't stop there. Various artifacts found in Kushite archaeological sites, such as jewelry, amulets, religious tools, clothing, and ceremonial objects, reveal a profoundly spiritual and artistic culture. Many of the necklaces and pendants bear symbols linked to fertility, the protection of ancestors, the power of the sacred feminine, and the connection with the stars. The symbolism is complex, sophisticated, and in no way inferior to the great icons of Egyptian or Mesopotamian civilization. And this is where one of the most ignored truths comes in: the influence of Kush on Egypt itself. Yes, you heard right. What many scholars try to make seem the opposite, as if Kush were merely a copy or late influence of Egypt, actually reveals a mutual flow, where Kush not only learned but also taught, not only received but also gave. This cultural and spiritual exchange between the two kingdoms was intense, rich, and continuous, and often Kush-led. But unfortunately, these artifacts are rarely displayed to the public. Many are hidden away in European museum storage, catalogued with generic descriptions, without any context that highlights their African origin. Others have been sent to private collections, where they will never be seen by African eyes. It's as if history is trapped behind glass and walls, available but inaccessible. The question remains, if all the evidence is there, why do they still insist on denying it? Why does the dominant narrative still say that Egypt was Mediterranean, while ignoring pyramids in Sudan, sculptures with African features, murals with dark skin, amulets with ancestral black symbolism? Because accepting this is not just changing the books, it's changing the foundations of an entire culture. It's admitting that the center of the world, for a long time, was black. That the light of civilization first shone on dark skin. That knowledge was born in the South. And this, for European colonial pride, is unacceptable. But for us, it's liberating. And if you've made it this far, feeling in your heart this mixture of indignation and pride, this desire to tell everyone what you've just discovered, do the following. Write in the comments, "The Stone Scream," or, if you want to go even deeper, leave below, "I see the truth in the pyramids of Kush." Because your voice helps to echo this memory that they tried to bury. And the more voices that echo, the stronger this movement of reconstruction will be. And now, take a deep breath. Because if up to this point we've talked about material evidence, the next step will take us to the Bible and what is written there about Kush, about the lineage, about the spiritual purposes of this people, may be more surprising than you imagine. Let's discover together what the scriptures hide. And if up to this point we've talked about evidence, archaeology, vestiges that have withstood time and censorship, now we need to enter an even more delicate field, perhaps the most sensitive of all, the profound impact that this erasure has had on the soul, mind, and spirit of black people. Because it's not just about hidden history, it's about a denied identity, a truth that was stolen, a distorted reflection that still influences how millions of people see themselves today. And this, my brother, my sister, has consequences that go far beyond books. It touches the way we dress, how we express ourselves, how we connect with the divine, how we dream, or even how we stop dreaming. When a black child grows up without references to greatness, sovereignty, or spirituality connected to their appearance, blood, and origin, they learn to diminish themselves without realizing it. They grow up seeing kings, heroes, and gods who are always white, always European, always distant from their image in the mirror. And they internalize that beauty is outside, that the sacred is outside, that power is outside. This is the first kidnapping, the kidnapping of self-esteem. This erasure didn't just remove names from books, it ripped ancestral connection from the soul. It broke ties. It cut invisible threads that linked us to our ancestors, to our roots, to our spiritual thrones. It created a void where there was once an altar. And this void was filled with guilt, inferiority, distortion, submission. It's as if we were made to believe that we were only the result of pain and not of glory, that we came from slavery and not from royalty, that we are survivors and not heirs. Have you ever noticed how black people around the world carry an ancestral pain, a feeling that often has no name, but is always present, like a cloud? This feeling is the echo of generations that have been separated from their history. When you don't know where you came from, it becomes much easier to accept any identity offered to you. It becomes easier to believe that your place is at the bottom, not at the top. It becomes easier to settle for the bare minimum. Because without a reference point of greatness, any crumb seems like a treat. And this affects not only the individual, but the collective. Entire peoples walk without memory. Entire communities repeat cycles of self-sabotage because, deep down, there is an unconscious belief that we are not capable, that we have never been protagonists, that this is not for us. But this belief is a lie that has been planted. And now, together, we are uprooting this poisonous root. We are saying aloud, we were an empire, we were priests, we were the first. We are heirs to a spiritual and historical royalty that no one can take from us anymore. And when this truth begins to be accepted, a transformation begins to happen. Something awakens. And it's not just racial pride. It's reclaimed spirituality. It's the certainty that God also dwells in black bodies, that the sacred also speaks Yoruba, speaks Bantu, speaks Nuer, speaks the languages of Mother Earth, that African altars are not inferior, they are ancient, that African spiritual practices are not backward, they are profound, circular, cosmic. This reconnection with ancestral spirituality is one of the greatest healings we can access today, because it gives us back something that was stolen from us, the sense of belonging to the divine. And here's a crucial point: historical reparation. We're not just talking about politics or economics. We're talking about collective healing, about reconstructing the truth so that it can once again inhabit our hearts. To repair is not just to compensate, it's to retell, to restore memory, to return what was violently taken away, the right to know who we are. The history of Kush, the throne of the Black Pharaohs, the African spiritual influence, all of this needs to be told, taught, and celebrated again. And when this history is reclaimed, it breaks mental shackles, because self-esteem doesn't spring from nothing. It feeds on references. When a black child sees that their ancestors were not just enslaved, but kings, architects, astronomers, spiritual engineers, something changes. When a young black person realizes that their skin color is not a curse, but a mark of ancestral nobility, they rise differently, they speak differently, they walk with purpose, because they understand that they carry within themselves the strength of an entire empire that they tried to erase, but couldn't. And if you feel this now, at this moment, if your heart has begun to beat faster, if your mind is opening, if your memory is being activated, then you are returning home. Because this journey we are making here is not just about history, it's about return. Return to essence. Return to your spiritual lineage. Return to the throne that is yours by inheritance, by blood, by divine right. And more than that, this return is also a mission, because those who awaken have the mission to awaken others. Those who hear this truth have the duty to sow this truth, at home, at school, on social media, in church, in the Torero, Afro-Brazilian Religious Center, in the temple, wherever. Because the more people know who they are, the less they will be manipulated, the less they will accept crumbs, the less they will walk with their heads down, the more they will live with purpose. And if you've stayed with me this far, I want you to write a sentence in the comments that's more than just a comment. It's a declaration of war against erasure. Write something like, "I am a descendant of kings," or "My ancestry is glory, not shame." These sentences have power. They are like a mirror that reflects the true image after years of distortion. They are seeds of healing. And by writing this, you help other people recognize themselves too. But it doesn't end there. Now that we understand the impact, the pain, and the possible healing, it's time to look at those who never forgot. At those who, even in the face of erasure, resisted, who kept the flame of African memory alive. And it is about them that we will speak now. The guardians of the heritage, the heirs of glory, the peoples who are rekindling the fire of the Kushite Empire in modern times. Let's move forward together, because the awakening is only just beginning. Let's move forward. Because while some tried to erase silence, mutilate the roots of a people, others, in silence, on the margins, in the shadows of the system, resisted. While official history erased the names of Kush, Piye, Taharka, Shabaka, there were mothers, fathers, grandparents, griots, spiritual leaders, and warriors of the word, keeping the memory alive in their bodies, in their dances, in their rhythms, in their rituals, and in the sacred words whispered at night, far from the ears of the oppressor. They knew. They carried what could not be recorded in books. The truth imprinted on the soul, on the skin, in the bones, in the ancestry that pulsates without asking permission. And that is why the Kushite Empire never died, because it lives in every tradition that resisted colonization. It lives in religions of African origin. It lives in circle dances, in chants of invocation, in preserved languages, in braids that draw maps on the scalp, in the drum beats that imitate the sound of the earth's heart. Kushite survived in faith, in living, spiritual, immaterial faith. and that is why they could not kill it. But something has changed in recent decades. Resistance has ceased to be merely about survival. It has transformed into a movement of rescue, into active reconnection, into a radical affirmation of identity. And this has a name, this has strength. This is called Afrocentrism. A movement that doesn't ask for space. It claims what is rightfully its own. A collective call to recenter history, to reposition Black people as authors, protagonists, legitimate heirs to ancestral glory. Afrocentrism is not merely an intellectual stance. It is a spiritual stance. It is about looking at the world through African lenses, about leaving the periphery of the narrative and reoccupying the center. It is about reconstructing epistemologies, ways of knowing, ways of existing. It is about remembering that, before we were enslaved, we were kings, priestesses, doctors, architects, oracles, thinkers, farmers, mystics. It is about removing the Black person from the role of passive victim and restoring their position as guardian of original wisdom. And the most beautiful thing is to see that this awakening is happening everywhere at the same time. Young Black people all over the world are studying their ancestors, learning African languages, reclaiming names, changing aesthetics, restoring worldviews, rebuilding spiritual bonds. Children who once learned to hate themselves are now being raised to love themselves, not out of vanity, but out of ancestry. And that is revolutionary. Because loving oneself in a world that has tried to teach us the opposite is an act of divine rebellion. We are seeing the emergence of study groups focused on Kush, Kemet, and ancestral African spirituality. We see Black women reclaiming the roles of warrior queens, spiritual matriarchs, and healing priestesses. We see Black men reconnecting with their roots, understanding that masculinity is also spirituality, also balance, also reverence for origin. This rediscovery is also evident in the altars that are being rebuilt, in the rituals that are being revived, in the names that are being reclaimed, in the orikis chanted with pride, in the traditional garments that are once again adorning bodies like sacred armor. It is as if the earth were crying out, "Come back, come home." And the sons and daughters of Africa have begun to answer this call. And there are also the artists, the musicians, the poets, the educators, the filmmakers, the writers, all participating in this great silent revolution. They are painting Black kings on urban murals. They are writing books about forgotten empires. They are creating music that exalts the Orishas, the ancestors, the names of those whom history tried to bury. They are the new griots, the messengers of this new era of reconnection. They don't ask permission. They create, they restore. And all that we are experiencing is not just a fad or a trend. It is collective healing. It is a return to the source. It is a realignment with the cycles of the earth, of time, of memory. Because the rescue is not just intellectual. It is emotional, spiritual, symbolic. It has a smell. It has sound. It has energy. It restores our certainty that we are not the product of chance. We are the continuation of a millennial legacy. We are part of a cosmic lineage that never lost its crown. It was only covered. And the more this rescue progresses, the more the structures of the modern world tremble. Because a people aware of their origins becomes dangerous. A people who recognize their spiritual strength do not allow themselves to be emotionally enslaved. A people who know the glory of their ancestors walk with their heads held high. And the system that feeds on our disconnection knows this. That is why, even today, it tries to erase, distort, and ridicule African knowledge. But now it's too late. Because the awakening has already begun, and it's irreversible. It's in the sacred spaces, in Black churches, in peripheral universities, in conversation circles, in cultural fairs, in grassroots schools, in the favelas, and in the villages. It's even in the algorithms, which, by the force of the people, are having to reveal what they previously hid. Ancestral memory has found the opening, and now it flows like a river. No one can stop it anymore. And if you feel you are part of this movement, if you understand that reclaiming Kukse is reclaiming yourself, if you realize that African spirituality is more than religion, it's reconnection with the soul, write in the comments, "I am part of the reconstruction," or "My roots are my strength." These phrases are like digital drums. Each letter you write vibrates collectively, and each person who reads it awakens a little more. Let's continue, because there's more to come. And in the next segment, We'll understand how pop culture, media, and modern art can both help and hinder this process, because the image projected of Black people in entertainment is also part of this spiritual war. So take a deep breath, because the next step is to see where the broken mirrors still are and begin to rebuild them, one reflection at a time. The awakening is real. The rescue has already begun. The ancestral flame is spreading like a wildfire that can no longer be contained. But it is precisely here that an uncomfortable, inevitable, profound question arises. Why does this truth frighten so much? Why, even with archaeological, linguistic, spiritual, and historical evidence, even with documentaries, books, research, and material proof, is there still so much resistance to recognizing the centrality of Africa in the formation of the ancient world? Why is it so difficult for the system to accept, or even allow, this memory to return to Black people? The answer is simple, but at the same time brutal, because a conscious people is a dangerous people for the structures of domination. The erasure of true African history was not a mistake. It was a project. And like any project of domination, it could not allow the base, the people, to have access to what they truly are, to what they truly possess, to what they truly carry in their genetic and spiritual heritage. Because knowledge is not just information. Knowledge is power. It is fuel for liberation. It is what transforms servants into kings, victims into leaders, the silenced into spokespeople. The system knows this, and that is why, for centuries, it has made gigantic efforts to keep this truth away from the center. And the fear isn't just of losing control of the narrative. It's the fear that, once aware, Black people will rise up with strength, with identity, with spirituality. Because it's one thing to control a people who believe they were born into slavery. It's quite another to try to control a people who know that their ancestors were pharaohs, priestesses, cosmic architects, spiritual leaders. The first submits, the second resists. Therefore, the truth has been censored on every possible front, in academia, in religion, in politics, and even in culture. Let's start with academia. How many professors dare to teach about the Kushite Empire in schools? How many school curricula include the 25th Egyptian dynasty? How many universities treat Afrocentrism as a legitimate epistemology and not as a cultural exoticism? Very few. And it's not because there are no sources. It's because those who control the production of knowledge are still committed to maintaining the old narrative. Europe at the center, Africa on the periphery. And any attempt to reverse this axis is seen as a threat. And within the academic field, there is something even more perverse: the delegitimization of ancestral knowledge. African oral wisdom is treated as inferior. The records of the griots are considered less valid than colonial archives. African cosmologies are reduced to myths, while Greek mythologies are taught as the basis of Western civilization. All this serves to reinforce a hidden message: Black knowledge is not trustworthy. And this is one of the most sophisticated forms of censorship. In the religious field, the manipulation is even more blatant. Many religious systems, especially those that arrived with the colonization process, made a point of associating the divine with whiteness. White God, white angels, white prophets, good with a European face. And all African spiritual expression was demonized, called witchcraft, idolatry, savagery. How many temples were burned? How many religions were banned? How many orishas, nkisis, vodans were forced into silence? But the cruelest thing wasn't the destruction of the altars. It was the destruction of the spiritual self-perception of Black people, making them believe that their sacred beliefs were dirty, that their faith was inferior, that to be accepted by God, they needed to renounce their culture, their bodies, their hair, their names. That, indeed, was one of the greatest spiritual crimes in modern history, a kidnapping of the soul. In politics, the game is equally calculated. A people who do not recognize themselves do not make demands. A people who are ashamed of their origins do not demand reparations. A people divided by historical lies do not build a future. That is why true African history has been removed from official speeches, public policies, and educational guidelines. The political elite, which benefits from maintaining inequality, has no interest whatsoever in forming a generation of conscious, proud, and spiritually strengthened young Black people. That would be dangerous. That would mean rupture. Even in pop culture, we see this censorship disguised. How many films truly show Egypt as it was? How many mainstream documentaries feature black pharaohs as protagonists? How many fiction books portray an African queen as a symbol of wisdom and leadership? They are rare, because there is a deep fear of a sovereign black aesthetic. The system has learned to tolerate blackness as comedy, as violence, as poverty, but it doesn't know how to deal with blackness as the center, as king, as a mirror of dignity. And this fear, this resistance, this censorship, all of this exists because the system knows that when the truth comes to light, nothing will ever be the same again. It will no longer be possible to teach lies. It will no longer be possible to exploit a people who now recognize the gold that runs in their own veins. It will no longer be possible to control bodies that have already understood that they are temples. And it will no longer be possible to stop the movement that has already begun. A movement of spiritual, historical, and cultural reconnection that is sweeping the world. And this movement has a face. It has color. It has an origin. It begins in Africa and spreads through the diasporas, the peripheries, the urban quilombos, the favelas, the spiritual centers, the black schools, the channels like this one. And that's why this video is so important, because it's part of that wave. It's a spark in that sacred fire. It's a call for you to rise up, not with weapons, but with wisdom, with identity, with truth. If you've understood the reason for the fear so far, if you've realized that the imposed silence is actually panic, that you'll discover who you are, write in the comments, "The system fears my conscience." Or, if you want to go even deeper, "The dark truth liberates the world." These words, my brother, my sister, are more than comments. They are spiritual declarations. They are activation codes. And in the next segment, we'll show that we're no longer just talking about the past. What's happening now, at this very moment, is the beginning of a silent revolution. We'll understand the role of the new generation in this rescue and why you might be the missing key. Because Egypt tried to erase Kush, but Kush awoke. Kush awoke. And now, my brother, my sister, what was just ancient ruin, a forgotten name, is breathing again. But perhaps the most powerful thing of all is realizing that Kush never left the scene. It never ceased to exist. It was asleep, yes, but never absent. Because the empire of Kush, in truth, was never made only of stone, gold, or pyramids. It was, and still is, made of people, of blood, of spirit, of memory, of a legacy that pulsates silently within every black body that walks this world, with a heart still unaware of its own throne. This is what many still haven't understood. Kush lives within us. He lives in the way we resist, even when everything around us said it wasn't possible. He lives in the faith of black women who pray, heal, create, and support families, communities, and spiritualities. He lives in the firm steps of the people who dance in circles, who sing with their bodies, who transform pain into art and absence into strength. He lives in the hands of those who braid hair as if drawing lineages in time. He lives in the eyes of every black child who asks, who questions, who wants to know, where did I come from? What colonial empires never understood, and therefore failed, is that you cannot erase an origin that is engraved in the soul. They stole names, yes. They hid books, yes. They distorted records, yes. But they couldn't cut the root, and it is this root that is now moving. It is rising from within. The new generation is discovering that it did not come from nothing, that it was not born a slave, that it is not the consequence of a mistake. It is the continuation of a sacred lineage, of a spiritual civilization, of an eternal kingdom that transcends matter, and that changes everything. Because when you understand that you carry an empire within you, you change the way you walk. You change your posture, your speech, your gaze. You stop begging for recognition and begin to occupy with authority the spaces that are yours by inheritance. You understand that faith is not submission, it's reconnection. That African spirituality is not superstition, it's ancestral science of the invisible. That black culture is not alternative, it's origin. Kukse is not dead. He is in the Afro-Brazilian music that has withstood time, whips, and churches. He is in the beat of the drums, in the litanies, in the chants that still invoke ancient names today. He is in the quilombos, maroon settlements, in resistance communities, in the toreros, Afro-Brazilian religious spaces, and even in the alleys where black youth create fashion, art, and language. He is in the urban peripheries where, even without knowing it, many live codes of ancestry daily, because spiritual memory does not need to pass through the mind to manifest in the body. It is in the prayers that invoke justice, in the dances that celebrate life, in the eyes that shine when a young black person discovers that their people founded civilizations. It is in the sweat of every black worker who rises early and supports their home, even without knowing that this daily act of resistance is the modern repetition of what their ancestors did to keep the community standing. It is in the tears of those who awaken to their own truth after years of living with a name that was not theirs, an identity that was not theirs, a faith that denied their own reflection. And now, this revelation is reaching more and more people. And it doesn't come with shouts. It comes with silent, profound, intimate recognition. Because when you hear Kush and something within you stirs, that's the ancestral spirit calling you back. When you feel that this story is mine, even without having learned it in school, it's because the blood is recognizing the lineage. This is not coincidence. This is destiny. And if you're here, listening to all of this so far, know this: it's no coincidence. You are part of this reconstruction. You were called. You were chosen to remember, to restore, to be a bridge between what was and what is to come. Because this generation is the generation of revelation. We are no longer in a time of doubt. We are in a time of certainty. The certainty that African royalty still lives, not only in books, but in the bodies, in the voices, in the faith of those who dare to recognize themselves. And this has profound consequences, because it's not just about racial pride. It's about spiritual repositioning in the world. Whoever understands that they are heir to an empire like Kush understands that they have responsibilities, that their existence carries a calling, that their trajectory is a sacred chapter in a history that the system tried to interrupt, but failed, because the ancestors are in a hurry, and they are whispering again, louder than ever, in the ears of those who stop to listen. So stop, breathe, feel. What you are hearing now is not just words. It is the echo of the past knocking on the door of your present, asking to enter, asking to live through you, asking to reign again, not on golden thrones, but in your heart, in your walk, in your understanding. Because royalty is no longer a visible crown. It is consciousness. And if this awareness has begun to awaken in you now, then write in the comments, "Kush lives within me." Or if you want to declare it even more forcefully, "I am the empire they tried to extinguish." Because these words, spoken with an open heart, are not just phrases. They are portals. They are spiritual summons. And each person who reads this in the comments feels the call as well. Because when one person awakens, they light the way for others. And now that you know this, now that you feel this, what to do with this truth, how to live from this revelation, how to transform this memory into action, into mission, into legacy, that's what we're going to understand in the final section. Because remembering is only the beginning. The next step is to live as an heir. If you've made it this far, to the end of this journey, it's because the calling has already reached you. It wasn't by chance. This message found you because you are part of the awakening. And now you carry the mission of keeping this flame burning. So do this. Comment below right now, "I am an heir of Kush," or "Nothing can erase my ancestry." Choose the one that touches your heart the most, or write both. These words are more than just comments. They are spiritual seals. And when you comment, you help this message reach even more people. Go ahead and leave a like. If this video touched you, if it made you rethink your story, your faith, your identity, that like is your way of telling the algorithm, this matters. And of course, subscribe to the channel now, because this was just one of the many truths we're going to reveal here. If you want to continue this path of reconnection, growth, faith, and Black consciousness, turn on notifications too, so you don't miss the next video, which is already ready for you. Actually, it's already here on the screen. Click now and continue this journey with me. The revolution doesn't stop here. She's only just getting started.